Ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the Commission and on behalf of the Man's Inhumanity to Man's Awareness Committee, I would like to welcome you all to this night's special event. This is the second night of our Man's Inhumanity to Man's Awareness events, and I'll have Dan explain some more about what we had yesterday.
Well, again, as Arlette said, welcome and thank you for coming out for tonight, the second of our series here on the Man's Inhumanity to Man in the city of Glendale. Tonight we'll have a wonderful topic presented by the Commission on Status of Women on the city of Glendale, and I want to thank them and individually. I know their chair Janice will do that, but I want to special thanks to staff member Teresa Alexandria for working with the Commission and the Man's Inhumanity Subcommittee. Her hard work and the work of the Commission to bring this to fruition. We really thank you for that.
Good evening. Thank you so much for joining us. In the interest of time, I have abbreviated my comments so that we can really spend the bulk of our time listening to this wonderful panel of experts that have been assembled and have so generously given their time to the Commission. But I must acknowledge the commissioners who are here with us today and in the audience. Commissioner Seda Kajoyan, Commissioner Sharon Weissman, Vice Chair Burns in the back. We are a commission that also have students that every year go through an interview process, and I'm pleased that we have with us today Rima Sahakian. And I'm sure that our other student, Eva Mursahakanian, will be joining us as well. We'd also like to give a very big thanks to our staff, city staff and liaisons, which is Teresa Alexandrian and Iris Hidalgo, who really keep us really connected and moving forward on so many of these events, because April has been quite a full month. We have had today, by the way, it is at least worth acknowledging, today is Denim Day. So if you see so many people here in denim and wearing jeans, I can't, I work in a hospital, so. But if you see them, they're here because they're supporting Denim Day, which is really a voice against anti-violence, anti-sexual abuse, anti-rape. So we thank you, all of us, for joining together on that. We've had a number of events this month that have also really brought forth all the issues of sexual assault, and we are very pleased that we have finally been able to put together an event on human trafficking. With that, you do have bios of all our speakers, so I'm not going to read their bios. They are lengthy, and then I wouldn't be true to my initial comment of being short. But with us is Lesford, he said, sorry about that. Lesford, and I am going to tell you a couple things about him in case you don't have the bio in front of you, because he just has a very extensive background. He is a child abuse prevention coordinator for the County of San Bernardino Children's Network. He has a passion for giving voice to those who are unheard, unseen, and to raise awareness about and work on policy against human trafficking, more specifically, the commercial sexual exploitation of children. In 2012, as a Los Angeles County Coordinator for California Against Slavery, his efforts were focused on the passage of Proposition 35, a successful ballot initiative increasing penalties on human traffickers. So that gives you just a little snippet. There's so much more about Mr. Lesford Duncan that I hope you will be able to see. We also have with us Dr. Powell. She's the Executive Director of the Mary Magdalene Project, a nonprofit organization dedicated to providing intervention, life skill programs, and services to female victims of domestic trafficking. Dr. Powell is it says 30, but it looks like, as she presents, it's 13. I think, no, it's 30. She's a 30-year retired veteran of the Los Angeles Police Department. Thanks for your service there. And a school teacher for the Los Angeles School Unified School District for 4 years prior to her career as an officer, so extensive knowledge. We've also had joined with us Dalita Miller. Dalita, you want to wave? Thank you. Right on cue. We couldn't have planned that better. She is no stranger to child sex trafficking. In January, she herself was a victim, and that's the perspective she's going to bring on this panel. But she also, in 2013, founded FAST, the acronym FAST, which is Families Against Sex Trafficking, and she's going to provide extensive expertise on that area. Our moderator is no stranger to Glendale and to working with many of our organizations. Her name is Anna Cho Finley. She is the program director of the Anti-Recidivism Coalition, a nonprofit organization working to better the lives of individuals and families affected by the justice system. She's a social worker. She is involved alongside the USC School of Social Work, which is her alma mater, and she works with all other local agencies. I'm not doing it justice because she does so much and she's so active, and she helped us with this group. But she has done a great amount of work to develop victim-centered interventions, research evaluations, and proposals for anti-human trafficking. We met her through the office of Senator Carol Liu, which was her position prior, and she always has brought with her a great amount of wealth on the topic of human trafficking. As with any of our events, we could not do it unless we had the support of many fantastic community groups in Glendale. We're so pleased to be part of Man's Inhumanity to Man series. We're especially thankful to the people who've joined forces with us in our sponsorship. We have Lisa Raggio, the community director from the YWCA. We also have the UN women who are here. They have some really pretty fantastic handouts over on the table over there, so if you could pay attention to what they have. The UN women. We also have the Missing and Exploited Children's Network, and we also have the City of Glendale. So a great big thank you to everybody who's joined forces with us. I'm going to turn it over to the moderator, and we hope that you find tonight to be thought-provoking and pretty eye-opening.
Before the moderator has her beginning of the events or open tonight's event, I would like to mention that Man's Inhumanity to Man, in collaboration with the Week of Remembrance Committee, who is chaired by Councilman Aran Ajarian and Mr. Frank Quintero, they have done a fantastic job into celebrating cultural diversity in our community. They reach out to all organizations and they put this kind of programs together so that our community becomes aware of what has happened in the past, the wounds of the past and the pain and aches of the present time. As Dan Bell, our community relations coordinator, mentioned, we have had different events. Yesterday we had poetry night, which was fantastic because we had recruited our high school kids and our community college kids. You know, that is the age that they initiate into their social political aspirations. And we wanted their undiluted, sincere expression of their hearts and souls of what goes on today around in the world. And it was a phenomenal night with tears shed, and also we had musical event at the end, which was a glorious musical presentation by the Heavenly Chants. Tomorrow we have April today, you know, as we'll have our moderator do the fantastic program that they have in mind, because I've seen how much work was put into this and how much collaboration. And tomorrow we have our April 24th Genocide Commemorative event at Alex Theater. And on Friday, as it was mentioned, we have a fantastic program with YWCA about domestic abuse. Having said that, now we will have our wonderful moderator of the evening.
I'm not her, by the way. I'm Denise Miller, and I'm the chair of the commission, and I'm back because we have our other panelist member here, and we can't start without introducing Miss Ana Luisa Cody, who is currently serving as the Senior Manager of External Affairs, Outreach and Community Engagement at the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. We are so pleased to have this exceptional panel with us, and with that, we would like to invite Miss Anna Cho Finley up. Thank you.
Thank you, Commission, and thank you to the audience, and thank you to the panel. And I just wanted to first say thank you because just your presence being here really shows that, you know, you have an interest in this issue maybe touches you personally, or you have the conviction just to be here and find solutions with us tonight. And I really believe that that is where it starts, is just with that conviction and that passion. So thank you all for being here. I'm really hoping that tonight is a discussion of not focusing on the differences and the comparisons of, oh, it doesn't happen here, or only happens over there, it only happens to this type of person or this look of a person, but we really focus on the intersections of our similarities as humans and our accountability to others of just being part of a community and existing together. So welcome. I'd like to start by just opening up to the panel to give us a brief overview of what does trafficking look like, and we have an amazing panel of very different perspectives from the national to the local to the state level. So I'd like to start with Ms. Anna Cody, if she could give us kind of a brief overview of what trafficking looks like on the national scale.
Okay, so I don't know how you're familiar with the National Center. We have been working on issues of missing and exploited children for about 30 years. In the last couple of years, I will start maybe from 2005. We started to see a lot of these issues related to missing kids and exploited children, and then until we figured it out, the children being reported missing, and then we found this kid up and reported from Los Angeles, and then we found it in a sex ring in New York. We're starting to figure out there was an issue nationwide because we focus on sex trafficking more than labor trafficking, and it had to be minors, so we can help out into cities and provide resources. So we started to collect information about this issue, and we still know it's an issue that's underreported. So we still had to collect data, and this is what we know. So in the past 5 years, so 2008 to 2014, the National Center, we received more than 6,000 missing children's cases, and 81% of these children were endangered runaways. Of the endangered runaway that we found and reported to the National Center, because as you may know, it's not a requirement for the states and cities to report to us, but if they do, we can help you a big deal through the process of finding and providing resources. One of the 7 were likely sex trafficking victims, and most likely they were girls. So when we started to see a big relationship in between these two missing and exploited children, we really started to target cities, social services for the both sides, for the reactive part, so people can actually report these cases to the National Center, because we figured out at some point some states didn't know where the children in foster care were, or they were running away, they were not reported to the National Center. And also in the prevention side, that's where I really focus my work when I travel, and really look at those gaps and see, what are we missing? We're really focusing on just the sex trafficking part, which is important in victims, but what happened before? How did children run away, and what are we missing in those, social services center, what are we missing in services after the kids are recovered, and also how we're doing as a community, because we also find out that children's sex trafficking is an issue that doesn't discriminate. So it can happen anywhere. We know the endangered runaways are a high-risk population, but also we know the children are being grooming or recruited in schools. Online, we have a huge amount of issues related to online sexual exploitation, children being abused, and then the history of abuse pretty much will lead to a situation of endangered runaways. So that's pretty much where we are nationwide. I haven't broken down into a state. We haven't broken down into a state yet, but probably, if we get information, I will be sending information related to California. I know that Los Angeles just signed an MOU, the Department of Children and Family Services just signed an MOU with the National Center to really request and work with us to call immediately to the National Center and report to the National Center after reporting to the law enforcement. Children going missing and they are under their care. We find out that out of the children that were reported to us is running away and found in sex trafficking rings. 60% of them they were in care of social services or foster care when they ran away. So there's a big issue that we have that and that part, and the other issue that that we see is the lack of prevention into a school, places that are being recruited, and in online safety. So that's pretty much the overview. Now I give you time to my colleague to speak.
Thank you. Lesford, you played a very large role in Prop 35 and kind of that advocacy. So I'm wondering if you could give a kind of an overview of the state of California and maybe any local.
Certainly. Good evening, everyone. And first of all, thank you to the City of Glendale for having us out here and for hosting this conversation, hosting this dialogue around one of the greatest inhumanities against man that could occur. I moved out here to California about 3 years ago to pursue my master's, and really, I was interested in human trafficking from an international perspective. I had heard about girls in countries such as the Philippines or Thailand or parts of Northern Africa or Eastern Europe that were being held in horrible conditions, that were being chained, that were being raped multiple times per night, that were being sold by their own families in order to bring in income to their families. And I said, this is absolutely atrocious. How could this be happening in our world? I never believed for a minute that the same things essentially were happening right here in the United States, and as close to home as here in Los Angeles County and throughout Southern California. I began doing some research and saw numbers that fluctuated anywhere from 100,000 to 300,000 children being at risk of being exploited each year. I looked into it some more, and where I was going to school out in San Bernardino County, I read an article that said that Baseline Road in San Bernardino County was one of the biggest tracks for sex trafficking in Southern California. And I couldn't believe that I was right down the road from there, that I was 2 miles away from it happening. So I began doing more research. I wanted to see what it looked like. Went with a colleague of mine out to Baseline, drove up and down the street, and sure enough, that's exactly what it looked like. The statistics say that the average age of entry into sex trafficking is between the ages of 12 to 14. The girls that I saw walking the street were about 15 years old. Cold, it was a cold night, wearing short skirts, clearly not wanting to be there. One of the things that I emphasize when I talk about domestic sex trafficking is the fact that most girls, most women in the life don't want to be there. That's a hard concept for a lot of people to grasp, and I'm assuming that by you being here, you understand that it's deeper than that. That there's a lot that goes into a girl becoming exploited. As Anna had mentioned, oftentimes these girls are abused. They're coming out of a foster care system that is very much broken. They're coming from homes that were very unstable, and essentially weren't receiving the love that they needed back then at a young age, that they then went out seeking from someone else. And then, of course, the pimp then comes in and grooms the girl and says, well, I'll be able to provide you that love. I'll be able to provide you that security that you need. I'll be able to provide you a hot meal. The things that we take for granted. and it absolutely blew my mind. So as Anna had mentioned, I began working on Proposition 35 in 2012 under the leadership of Daphne Fung, our executive director, and our organization, California Against Slavery, collaborated with the Safer California Foundation and Chris Kelly to put together a ballot initiative that really increased penalties on the perpetrators of domestic sex trafficking and provides more services or provides more funding for services for victims for organizations that serve victims of exploitation.
We'll get in more into kind of the policy side in a little bit, but Lesford and Anna both made really good points that it does not discriminate against race or gender, and I kind of want to also bring up the other side is that many boys are affected by this as well, and many young men, and especially if we want to get into the discussion of recruitment and how sometimes being part of that recruitment process, you're being victimized as well. So really noting that this also does not discriminate against gender, and we are really talking about young boys and young women, men, everyone. So we'd like to play a short video clip for you today that really kind of shows the non-discrimination of this issue. I'm going to try my best to play this. This is called The Making of a Girl. The title kind of explains itself.
You know, you're 12 years old and you're living with your moms, and your mom's is struggling because she didn't think that life was really going to work out like this for her, and she doesn't have a man around, and the men that are around haven't always been that great. Sexual abuse is becoming kind of normal for you, and you think that other people don't have secrets that are as bad as you, and maybe you've tried to talk to somebody at school and they haven't really heard you, or maybe they just haven't had time to listen to you. And so you're seeing these girls on the videos, and they're so pretty and they're so sexy, and so your way at 12 of escaping into this fantasy world is to think about what it must be like to be one of these girls, and you know that adult men already look at you, and you wonder how you can kind of use that.
I was just a child, and that's how I was supposed to live, like a child and like an adult.
So one day you're coming out of school and there's a guy outside in a Cadillac, and he's nice looking. I mean, he's got the baseball cap and the jeans and the Timbs, and he tells you how pretty you are, and you know how pretty your hair looks, and it's been a while since anybody even really noticed anything about you. And for the first time, you feel like somebody's really interested in you, because now all of a sudden he's asking you about your dreams and your hopes and where your father's at, and he says that he can be a daddy to you.
The people that I shouldn't have depended on, I was dependent on for support.
And so that night he takes you to a club and he puts you up on the stage and he gives you a few drinks, and there's men throwing dollars at you, and it's scary, but all the time you're just looking at his face in the back of the room, and he's like, you know, go ahead baby girl, go ahead, you're doing it for daddy, and you're feeling proud because nobody's ever said that to you. And so then that night he tells you that there's more stuff that you've got to do, and he takes you into a room and there's a man there, and he tells you to strip, and you think this is something you'll never do, and yet there's a part of you that already knew how to do this, because that's what your stepfather's been doing to you all these years before. And so you turn that trick, and it's like a part of you has died inside. And so you come out of the club that night, and you get in the car, and you know he's pumping 50 Cent, and he takes you to McDonald's, and he tells you, you did a good job tonight, sweetie. And he's stuffing his pockets with the $1,000 that he made. And right now, you're happy.
The people that I shouldn't have depended on, I was dependent on for support. And
you feel like this is the best that it's ever going to get. And everything else in your life has prepared you for this moment. All the sexual abuse, or the neglect, or the drama, or the pain, or the trauma has prepared you for tonight, where you stepped across a line that you always thought you'd never really quite step across. And you don't realize that night what it'll be like to be on the track and get raped. And you don't realize that daddy isn't really going to protect you. You don't realize what it's like to have a gun held to your head that night. You don't realize what it's going to be like when you catch your first STD. You don't realize what it's going to be like when you first come home and daddy beats you for the first time because you didn't make enough money. You don't know what it's going to be like to have cops offer to trade sex with you in exchange for not being arrested. And then sometimes you'll do that and they'll still lock you up anyway. You don't know what it's like to sit up in jail and know that you just made $1,500 for your pimp last night, but he won't come down and put $200 bail on just to get you out a few days early. You don't know what it's like to walk down the street at 6 o'clock in the morning when you're just getting off work and people are starting their day and they see you and they know what you do and they look at you in a way that you just don't feel like you belong in that world anymore. And you don't know what it's like to feel like you've lost part of yourself along the way and to feel like you'll never leave. And no matter how many times you try to leave, he'll always find you and catch you. But that night, all you care about is the fact you're riding in a Cadillac and you're eating McDonald's and you're listening to 50 and you got this one man who you really think loves you sitting right by your side.
So that is Rachel Lloyd, who is an amazing survivor and champion in this movement. She runs an organization called GEMS. In terms of resources, I highly recommend you look them up and be familiar with their work. They're doing some incredible work. So a lot of discussion came out of that. I just kind of realized that maybe we should start with defining what trafficking is. So the actual, what does trafficking mean? Trafficking has to include the act, which could be recruitment, harboring, it could be actual transporting someone from city to city over international lines, domestic lines. And then the second piece is you have to have the means. So that could look like coercion, and she really talked about that a lot. Of, you can be coerced by a boyfriend or, an intimate relationship, or it could be, drawing from money or something like that. Versus we have commercial sexual exploitation, which you might hear the term CSEC quite often, which is a little bit different, but that just means that it's more of, you're part of the commercial sex industry exchanging of money. So that oftentimes what that looks like is when we're putting children or young women online and having them be part of pornography videos or things that are more commercial. So if you guys ever have questions about that, just please write it down and we'll answer all of these. We're probably gonna be throwing a lot of terms out at you tonight. So I think this video was brilliant in just kind of normalizing that it could just be as simple as someone asking you out on a date and kind of, everyone wants to feel like they're part of something, and it's human nature to want to be loved, and how easily we can kind of fall into that. So not to blame anyone, but that's just part of our human nature to want to be part of something. So I wanted to have a little bit of a discussion about what are the other kind of factors that increase vulnerability for trafficking, and I'd like to direct that to Ms. Delita Miller.
What are the other factors? We touched on, of course, sexual abuse, any type of abuse, physical abuse. I've had some of the girls that I've worked with say that their parents were emotionally unavailable. Those can be vulnerabilities. Drugs. A lot of the victims have addictions to drug habits. But really what I've found most commonly is either survival sex, trying to survive, or either the coercion, or the befriending. So we have lots of not girls but boys too, but lots of victims who really think that this gentleman is going to be their boyfriend and they're really going to have this life. And if they do certain things, then this is how it will happen. Or in my case, I know that I was introduced as a survivor of sex trafficking, but my passion comes from being a parent of a teen trafficking survivor who was befriended by a 13-year-old in school. So we have the way, she thought that she was just going with her teenage friend to protect her, and she found herself, in the, I don't want to say arms, but in the possession, so to speak, of a trafficker. So there are several vulnerabilities. Lack of knowledge can be one of them as well.
So education,
Lack of
abuse,
education,
poverty, lack of maybe mentorship. I mean, all across the board.
Yeah.
Could you share a little bit on maybe any warning signs or things that we could look for of if we maybe encountered someone not that we should all be out thinking that everyone's a victim, but like anything that might be a red flag for, maybe that we could reach out to that person or...
Well, I would say from a parent's perspective or family or neighbor's perspective, maybe you may see a child who was maybe more passive and introvert. I would say more of an introvert, and they may become more outwardly a little more promiscuous. What I realized in my situation is the secrecy. We had a cell phone that popped up. The cell phone cost like $300, and like, where did this cell phone come from? Things like that. Tattoos is something that I look for, mostly in certain areas, because I know a lot of times young people or victims, get tattoos, but on the neck areas, a lot of times it's branding on the face. Those are signs. And another thing that I noticed is I had a 13-year-old victim who was trafficked from the age of 11 to 15, well, she was 15, from 11 to 15. And I said, well, you lived at home? She says, yes. I said, well, how did you do it? She says, well, I would leave on the weekends, and then I would disappear. So even if a child is gone on a Friday and has no whereabouts, over the weekend, those are signs of possibly trafficking.
Dr. Powell, you run an organization called the Mary Magdalene Project, and I was wondering if you could just kind of touch base on what are the unique needs of survivors to heal, and just kind of talk about service providing.
Thank you very much. The Mary Magdalene Project, and what we just watched was what happens to the children. And the Mary Magdalene Project deals with the end result. We deal with the adults. So if you look at the average age of entry being 12 years old, you could have someone that started at 15, now she's 25, she's been in the life for 10 years. There's a lot of services that are provided for the youth, and I really understand that, and I think that should be done. However, there's another component to that, and that's the adult. Because if you realize if a girl is now 17 with all the issues that come with being trafficked, and now she's 18, she's no less of a victim than she was at 17. So there's a lot of things that happen in that respect. So let's say you have a girl that's 25. She was taken at 15. Well, the only socialization that she's going to have is from the pimp. So the pimp is the one that ends up raising her. So there's going to be health issues. There's going to be school issues. There's a lot of psychological trauma that comes along with this. And so some of the services that need to be provided is the realization that although she was taken at 15 and now she's 25, there's arrested development, because guess what, she's still 15. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of things that need to be done. Jobs, education, psychological services are very important, life skills. At the Mary Magdalene Project, what we do is we actually meet these women where they are. So if they want to be a pharmaceutical assistant, then we help them with that journey to get there. So we don't tell them what it is we think they need to do. We find out what it is they need to do and to be able to help them to be able to get there. So those are just some of the services. And the gap is dealing with the adult side of this issue. That's where the gap in services is, and that's where it's real important. Because when you think about it, a girl between 18 and 30, she's in the at that age where she's going to be able to have children. If you don't break the cycle, it starts all over again. So it behooves us to really pay attention to the adult. And one other thing that I'd like to say is that although we talk about the foster system and we talk about the girls that may not have had a good beginning or what we consider to be a stable beginning, but we can't forget that these pimps are also recruiting out of the colleges. I was a vice sergeant for 4 years prior to me leaving LAPD, and there were pimps on the campus of CSUN, UCLA, and USC. So it can be anybody's daughter, and that's the message, and that's the gap of some of the messages that go out. This could be any of us, any of our daughters. When you really think about who's going to really be the most vulnerable, it's that girl we keep in the bubble in our middle and upper middle class homes. And then what do we say? Oh, you should go away to college. Guess who's waiting for her if you don't educate her before she gets there? So as we're talking about this, I really want you to really dig deep and understand that this can happen to any of us in any of our families as we go along with this discussion today.
So really understanding there is a healing journey, and that can look different for any individual, and that there's no sort of cookie cutter intervention at all. I love that the piece of meeting the person where they're at and really, empowering them to have a unique ownership of reclaiming of their life again, because probably maybe the first time they've ever been offered that. I wanted to ask Anna to kind of touch base on the relationship between missing children and sex trafficked minors, if you could kind of define the parallels and the differences between those.
Well, I think a little bit explain before how we have seen this. Since we're seeing a lot of children reported missing, and these a lot of 81%, 60,000 in a year period, 81% is a huge number, is for a runaway, and 61% out of this number is just part of the, for this social service. I think that what we start seeing the similarity between, there is a link between the two of them that we didn't see before, because we thought sex trafficking, it was something to happen somewhere else. So we never brought into the idea, we saw these kids were running away, we never stopped finding missing kids. And that was one of the reasons, because children, get a little highlight from the media, from the community, and after a couple of years, children, are forgetting. So we keep looking for these kids, and when we found them, I cannot agree more with with her saying the children maybe are running away from home at 12, and then we keep searching for them, and then they're at the age of 18, and we found them, and then they are 19, they are no longer minors. So what do we do about these children? So children, I will say the high risk they were talking about the foster care, because they know the pains they're going to go to these children, because they are the more vulnerable to this type of situation. However, as I said before, it doesn't discriminate, because it doesn't have to go missing to be sex trafficked, because you mentioned it, where kids, they can be sex trafficked, and when they are at home, we have situations with children being traded by sex or by drugs. A lot of kids, moms, they are trading their children for drugs to pimps for weeks and days. So this situation, I would call it an epidemic, pretty much, because it's impacting every single community in different areas. So this, I don't know if I can answer that.
No, you raised a really good point, and Delita kind of mentioned too, of, when you see kind of the quiet young man or woman, but there's also a very underground piece to this discussion, and sometimes you will never see them. I've met survivors who have said they were never allowed to see the day of light. They were transported from apartment to apartment by taxi drivers who are also a part of the business as well. So there's many people that you will never see at all. So, you could, maybe if you're living in an apartment building and you kind of just sense something strange going on, this still is a very underground industry, to the point even at the, the nail salons and the massage parlors. When you kind of see a place that maybe is closed off and has curtains and is open 24 hours, you might want to question, what's going on, I recently drove to Palm Springs, and in the back of the gas station was a sign that says massages, and on the door literally said Tokyo Massage. And I was so freaked out. I wanted to take a picture, but I was so freaked out I ran out of there because I was like, little Asian woman, I don't want to be in here. So it was just not a good situation. But obviously there does not need to be a massage parlor in the back of a gas station in the middle of the desert. So these are the type of things that are more kind of the underground hidden signs that we quite often see. So now to, stay action-oriented and just very solution-based, I want to talk about what can this discussion offer and what can Glendale do to help combat this issue of trafficking. And we have 4 very different perspectives and wisdom and experience. So we're gonna touch a little bit from policy to prevention to the community organizer and also down to law enforcement. So please, ask us questions along with this if you are looking for resources or kind of what things that you can get involved in. But let's start with, from Lesford, you have an amazing background in policy. What can Glendale do kind of on the policy end?
So from a policy perspective, what I really encourage everyone to do is stay engaged, stay in your representatives' ears. Make sure that we have a good group of maybe about 50, 60 people here. If all of us were to write to the city of Glendale and say, this is collectively what we determine we need within our city, your representatives will then have to hear that and move forward. So that's one way to stay engaged. Look for bills that are currently going through the state legislature. So, for example, California Against Slavery is currently pushing forward 2 bills. Senate Bill 1165, which focuses on sexual abuse and sex trafficking prevention, and what they're aiming to do is incorporate this into the curriculum, into middle school and high school curriculum. So, for example, we heard that the average age of entry into trafficking is 12, and a matter of fact, that number is being shown to decrease. So it behooves us to get prevention education into middle schools so that kids know how to protect themselves. This legislation only adds to the current policies around sexual education. So of course parents can have their kids opt out of that, but we really need comprehensive education around sex education. The other bill that California Against Slavery is really pushing for right now is Senate Bill 1388, which is otherwise known as the demand bill. So increasing penalties on the Johns, and I don't even like the term Johns because it makes purchasers of sex sound like a normal guy, but really rapist. If you think about it, the people that are going out, that are buying young girls and young boys, buying adult women and adult men for sex, that should absolutely be considered a crime. It's interesting when we think, and a lot of my work focuses on children, but that's not to neglect the adults. But it's interesting to think that when let's say a young girl is raped by a 40-year-old man, we see that clear as day, we say that that's rape, that's child molestation. But for some reason, when that money exchanges hands, it's treated completely differently. Society sees it completely differently, and the penalties that we're imposing on the purchasers is almost a slap on the wrist. I mean, so often we hear about John's just going free. Meanwhile, the victim is oftentimes arrested. So that's something for us to consider. I mean, there's so many other ways to remain engaged, and I'll go ahead and give the floor also to my colleagues.
You know, one thing that I would really wanted to point out, because sometimes we have a tendency when we're in smaller cities sometimes to think, okay, well, that might be happening over there, but it's not happening here, right? Because you don't have a actual track. Whereas coming from LAPD, you know, of course, There's tracks all over the place because it's a huge city, right? But I'll share this with you. What you do have is motels. You have hotels, right? And so that becomes a venue for outcalls. So what will happen is you'll have publications like Backpage. You'll have publications like Redbook. And if you actually look on the websites, because working undercover capacity, we would look on the websites, right, and do reverse stings. And so looking at those, at one point I'm going, I thought this was illegal because it was so blatant, right? You can even see the young girls, and sometimes their faces are blurred, and when their faces are blurred, then you know it's a juvenile. And so what do they use as their vehicle in order for them to be able to complete these acts? And it's your hotels and your motels. And the girls will say, I would rather be in a city outside of Los Angeles, or there are places I won't go in LA because it's safer. What's safer than Glendale, right? So aside from that, we talked about massage parlors. Massage parlors are springing up everywhere, aren't they? They're in their little, what do you call it, the mini malls, right? Well, here's a clue. If the massage parlor is open at midnight, if the men go into the massage parlor and the woman greets you with a thong on and 8-inch heels, there's a clue. Because I don't know about you guys, but when I go get a massage, they're usually not dressed like that, right? And you'll really see sex trafficking in there, because when I have busted those places, the women are in there for 12, 13 hours. They will give them a ride from, let's say it's Koreatown, to the massage parlor, where they have to stay there for 12, 13 hours. They're unable to leave because there's someone in there that's cooking for them. When you go in there and you talk to the girls, or they're being arrested, they have no ID whatsoever because they're being trafficked. Also, brothels, alive and well. I've busted brothels that were in regular neighborhoods, as well as an apartment within a 15-unit apartment building. So it is alive and well. And so what does it look like? The brothels will have the same activity as drug activity, people going in and out, in and out. If you're landlords and you go into your building and you notice that the bedroom doors that used to have locks from inside are now on the outside, that's a clue. So you can see how it can hide itself and masquerade itself, but I would bet my bottom dollar that it's going on right here in Glendale. So some of the things that you can do is educate your girls. Educate your girls. You guys educate your own children in terms of what does that look like. Let your daughters know how much you love them. Let them know how pretty they are, so therefore they don't have to rely on someone else to tell them those things. These guys are recruiting out of the malls, right? And guess what? I went over to the Topanga Mall just 2 weekends ago. Now, I don't know for sure, but there were guys in there that could have possibly been in there recruiting. So who would think that somebody would be in there recruiting, right? It's a place that you least expect. So I think that those are some of the things that that you guys can do. Law enforcement has this paradigm shift where they're starting to understand that the issue is not just by choice. So what happens is Mary Magdalene Project will actually go along with task force where we're able to offer our services to women right then and there. And so that's kind of the paradigm shift, as well as going after the pimps and johns, which I think is very important. And I'm so passionate about this because of the fact that I did run a vice unit, and from what I was seeing out there, and I'm thinking at 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, does anybody understand what's happening? Does anybody do anything about that? About this? And that was about 3 years ago, and from what I can see right now, there's a whole lot being done about it. So it would behoove the city of Glendale to also jump into this paradigm shift, because it also does affect you.
Dr. Powell kind of covered a little bit. My whole focus, well, in this, I found my spot, I'll say, because I worked with several human trafficking organizations, is the family piece. And the reason I say that, so what can Glendale do for the family piece? Well, Families Against Sex Trafficking is focused on engaging, educating, and empowering families who have experienced sex trafficking. When my daughter was taken, my family and I had to be relocated. And there were lots of services that weren't available for us. There weren't support groups. I wasn't educated on sex trafficking. So like Dr. Powell said, not only educate your children, but continue educating yourselves. Learn more about their Facebook pages, Redbook, Craigslist, things like that, where they can be sold, how they're recruited. If you're part of a PTA, get in those schools and push this, because the education piece is very important. I have a good friend who grew up very close to here in Pasadena, and she went off to college. She was raised in what we would consider a sheltered home. She went off to college and didn't know the recruitment techniques and didn't know things, right? And so that's how she was trafficked. So even though Glendale is this wonderful city, the education piece is still important. And I'll tell you one other little brief story. Right down in Pasadena, I don't know if you heard of it, there was a murder of a gentleman. He owned a barber shop. He was stabbed to death. And the moral of that story, it was a trafficking victim who went into on a date, as she called it, and her pimp came in during the date and stabbed the man to death and killed him. And right now she's serving time in jail for the murder of this individual. And that young lady happens to be the mother of my grandson. So I tell you that this can hit very close to home. Maybe the trafficking isn't here, and a lot of things that one subject that a lot of people don't really like to touch on is the buyer's perspective. And being a survivor of sex trafficking, as I got older, I learned how to target certain areas. And I would tell you that Glendale and Pasadena would definitely be the target for my trafficker or for traffickers or even for myself, because it's, I'll say, somewhat more wealthier than parts of Los Angeles. So even educating the men and getting the men more involved is something else that I would suggest for Glendale.
So just to summarize, a lot of education on all levels, from policy to your families, to your community, to your young men and women. It's going to take everyone. It's going to take this entire movement. So we thank you for being part of this and being part of the movement. And we'd now like to open it up to audience questions. We've thrown a lot at you today, stories, terms. Does anyone have questions?
It's interesting that you brought that up. When I was working on Prop 35, I was living in Monterey Park, and it was interesting because I hadn't been there for long enough to really understand the city and the community. But I had given a presentation to a political group in Monterey Park, and as I'm speaking with them, they're saying, well, this is a really important issue and we absolutely support, but this doesn't really happen in our community. How can we really rally support in our community? And that same day, I remember driving down Atlantic, and there are some apartments right there off of Atlantic, and I forgot the cross street, but there's some apartments right there. And I don't know whether or not it was trafficking. I called it in and reported it, but I saw a young girl come out of her apartment wearing just a robe, and an older gentleman who didn't look like any type of relative of hers or anything walking in. And I told the group that story, that scenario, and noticed it more and more as the months went by. Noticed that it was a regular trend in that particular apartment complex. Another scenario out in LA. There was a massage parlor where that was open till 10 o'clock at night. That was right across the street from where one of our interns lived. It's really going on all around us, and the more I learned about human trafficking, the more I became aware. And sometimes as advocates, we become kind of like the human trafficking police. We're looking for it in every corner, but just having that heightened vigilance, that's that could mean that you're saving someone's life, or that could mean that you're breaking up a sex trafficking ring that spans several cities, several states, and includes hundreds of girls. So always report. One of the tools that I would give all of you, and I encourage all of you to, all right, right now, if you would, take out your cell phones. If you would, just for a second, take out your cell phones. And I want you all to plug this number into your phone and keep it on hand. It's 1-888-373-7888. So that's 1-888-373-7888. And that number is a number to the National Human Trafficking Hotline. If you ever see something, if you even suspect something, report it. That the hotline is ran in collaboration. I see this lady has a card with her, which is awesome. Share that number on social media. Let people know. If you see something, say something. They collaborate with law enforcement, with the local law enforcement agency, and they'll make sure that case is investigated.
The other thing I wanted to say, and this is on the law enforcement side, is that especially since your department's not as big as like the Los Angeles Police Department, but encourage monies to go into training on this issue. That's really important. So if officers need to go to the FBI academies, or they need to go away for certain training, to be able to encourage to be able to have funding so that they can have the proper training as it pertains to not only human sex trafficking, but human labor trafficking as well.
Because that first point of contact is so crucial in terms of what the next steps could look like. I also wanted to go back onto Lesfer's point about the hotline. Another really good resource is if you go to Polaris Project, Polaris Project, you actually can look up Glendale and you can see how many calls have been made from the city of Glendale about this issue. You can see how many reports have been made about Glendale. You can look up any city in the state, in the entire US. So if you're interested in what's happening locally and just want to see how many calls have been made about this topic, go to that website and they have reports all the time about it. Is there any other questions? No, I think that's really important. It's kind of this grooming phase that happens of where you're trying to really build the trust of the person, and that could be as simple as taking someone out to lunch, and then you kind of build this trust, and then all of a sudden it turns into offering that person threats and saying, oh, you don't love me anymore, you just want to go back to your family. So it can very quickly turn into something quite bad. So no, I'm glad you brought that up.
I also would like to add, we're talking about the numbers that we can call if we see something, but also if we go back a little on the prevention side, to really do an assessment, because I know each of us belongs to a church, a school, they had children in school, I belong to some organization. So do a little assessment about, are we really talking about this issue? Is the school really teaching children about how a perpetrator, we call it pimp, so I'm assuming that when I say pimp or perpetrator, you're thinking about these ugly men and all, but really sometimes they don't look like that. They're very handsome. They are 18 years old, they're 20 years old, they are really willing to traffic these girls and boys. So when we teach children and youth, are we teaching about how they look like, or how we teaching about behaviors? Also, we're having a hard time bringing this issue to schools, because schools don't want to deal with this, and that one of the places they are being recruited. Also, job offers, modeling offers, bus stop, universities. So this thing is growing and growing. So when we talk about prevention, we look at everywhere. Also, not to look for the massage parlor, but also online. We have an increase. We have we ran at the National Center the cyber tip line, which is kind of the 911 of the internet, where if you at some point are in the internet and you get across some site that you feel is not right, you can refer that site to us and we can look at it. And we have found a lot of children being exploited in sex trafficking through online without the need to go in the street. Because technology it has helped a big deal, but it also have bring these other side issues that where we have situation where, before people or this we call it John. The people who want to have sex with a minor will get to an airport, big airport like Atlanta. We have seen this where they reserve the kid before they get there. So they got there, they have sex with the kid, they pay to the pimp online, and then they take off. So prevention is a very important part. Sensibilize the people about the issue. The children that are there, or the minors that are there, even the women that are there, they're not there because they want to. And when I travel nationwide, this is something that I sometimes have opportunity to go and meet with them in shelters. And these women and girls had dreams when they were 6, 7, and at some point, something broke. They met the wrong person. They never, so it's a big important. It's very, very important that we teach children to go and they don't find love in the wrong places. So communication, and we also tell the parents you have to communicate with your kids. But we really some of the parents say, well, I want to do it, but I don't know how. So also give the parents the tools to do that. Also start very early on, because if we're talking about online sexual exploitation, children at 5 years old already had access to the internet. So what could be an age-appropriate resource that you can implement into the school, how you can bring it into your faith-based organization, how we can assess the city's social services. Are we putting a lot of attention on the children at risk? Not only if they are already in the welfare system, but also, children spend a lot of time in a school. A counselor, educator could be a good source of how you see the children at risk. Is the children in family violence? Are the children, being abused at home? Can you see something before we get to the point the children will run away? So the assessment part for us in the prevention is very, very important. And also, of course, if you see something, you can call law enforcement, National Center, Polaris Project, or the human trafficking, any number you feel that you can report it, but also, what we can do before the situation happens. And we really can send a message that the city of Glendale is ready to really face the situation, and send a message, also a positive message. They are not going to tolerate any type of this situation when it happens here. Because probably maybe it's not a child for your community, but they also remember that the kids have been moving from one place to the other. So probably pins will go to places they are not doing anything about it. So whatever you do, the small that you can do is something that you can help towards that. You don't have to save a victim, which, if you can do it, of course, we want you to do it. But also, you wanted to make the Glendale a safer city for the kids. And that starts in everywhere where the children are. School, churches, after-school program, the people who are really responsible for the children, because the children at the end, they are our responsibility. And I say children from 0 to 17, 18, because they are still. So that is the message of the prevention side.
I just want to add one sentence to that. We teach our children to say no to drugs. We teach our children about stranger danger. We talk to them about that all day long. The one thing that we aren't talking about to our children is that predator that's out there that's willing to take that girl and sell her. So that's my message as it pertains to the thing that we don't want to talk to our young girls about, or even to our boys about, is the one thing that's going to get them taken at the mall, at the colleges, or just walking down the street. So that's very important.
Absolutely. It is the fastest growing criminal enterprise in the world. And I sometimes say that if we can look at trafficking also as an issue of violence against humans, and reframe how we kind of think about violence and public health even, this is a public health issue that is completely changing and hurting our communities. So human trafficking it's violence. So if we can really look at it on that kind of level, that's just exactly what this discussion is about right now, because what every single person in this room is going to do is going to leave and tell someone else, hey, you know, I was at this panel tonight, this is what I heard. So it's going to be a trickle effect all over Glendale, so thank you. Question is there any sort of public service announcement that we can kind of share on through social media or that television can be part of? And I think Lesford might have some experience with that.
I know that California Against Slavery and CASRE, which is their affiliate organization, which is California Against Slavery Research and Education, they always put out videos either promoting positive encouraging people to become foster parents, or just raising awareness about trafficking. There are also a series of survivor videos as well that were done where survivors speak out very candidly, and I believe Delita was in one as well, where they speak very candidly about their story in a way that people get it. And realize that this is not just, you know, survivors aren't just statistics. They're real people that went through very real situations, and this is something this is what we need to fight in our community. So California Against Slavery, that's CaliforniaAgainstSlavery.org. There are several other organizations. MMP, we have a video as well. Cast LA puts out PSAs and videos. I'm not sure if Polaris Project does videos, but they put out a lot of statistics, Shared Hope International, and so forth.
And you can go on our website. It's www.mmp.org also.
And I think it's kind of a tricky subject because while we want to empower survivors to tell your story, and that is going to be what really can change legislation, change how we think about it, there's also a protection piece that we don't become exploited of the exploited, if that makes sense. So I don't always agree that you should put an 11-year-old survivor on the screen. I feel like now is the time that we have to protect that child. So it is a little bit tricky about how we promote that. That makes sense?
Or invite them to speak or whatnot. At events. You know, oftentimes there are young survivors that may want to speak and may feel ready to speak, but it's important for us as a community to focus on the protection, the healing, the recovery of victims before they become spokespersons or advocates, public advocates.
Right. Yes. So she's talking about how we kind of have glamour in social media, whether it's movies or videos or just even our social media platforms, how we maybe have glamorized words like pimp and kind of turned it into being a cool thing. So have we seen any sort of efforts to reduce the demand and kind of make the community accountable for language and those kind of issues?
What I can tell you is this, is in the past, I'll say 3 to 4 years, awareness and education is up and coming, I'll say, with regards to human trafficking. So no, that hasn't been addressed on a large scale. However, I have had the opportunity, along with several other survivors, to train in many communities on social media and its connection to human trafficking. But one thing that I noticed is that I read this book to gain more knowledge about the mindset of a trafficker, and it's called Pimpology 101 by Pimp and Ken. And he made a statement that he saw money in the rap game, and he saw that using the rap game, he could not only get more girls, but also gain more men. And to me, that's just like I don't want to say the enemy, but that's just self-exclamatory as saying, I'm going to use this avenue to, you know, deter young people. And he said clear as day, young people listen to music. Now they follow me. Now they worship me. Now I have the guy selling women, you know. And to go back to what the Safe Cities is that within Los Angeles, there is a majority, and I'll say at least 70% of young girls that think wearing short shorts and giving a lap dance makes a guy wants them. And this is their mentality, right? So showing them that there is more than having sex to become a video, you know, model. So a lot of this does have to do with taken away from that campaign, but also having women such as yourselves to show these girls, hey, there is another, there is another way to be a woman. There is a point of respecting yourselves. Because what I realize is what I've seen working in Los Angeles, Compton, and Long Beach and areas like that, is that at the age of 14, the majority of these young girls, and it's sad to say, do not respect themselves. They're groomed before they reach their traffickers. They're groomed at home, they're groomed from TV, they're groomed by the community. And so to me, the key to that is, of course, providing them with role models, with mentors, with advocates that say, look, sweetie, let me show you how to fill out a FAFSA. Or, let me show you that, not to, wear your skirt this short, or, this makes you look a different way. So I don't know if that answers your question, but no, not yet. But trust and believe, we are definitely working behind the scenes trying to make that happen.
Yeah, I mean, I also think that requires a much longer discussion that I know we don't have time for. When we think about language and really looking into the histories and cultures of all these different backgrounds, and we're saying trafficking, but trafficking it's slavery. So where is this rooted from? Well, much of this stems from slavery and the foundations of what this country was founded on, and many other countries around the world. So I'd like to discuss that more with you, and we'll talk more. So, thank you.
I think we should keep that applause going and thank our panelists for coming in tonight, and our moderator. Thank you so much. I would like to recognize and thank a few people, one being our city clerk, Artie Kisakian. And if he could come up, I think he will make a presentation. Our State Assembly member, Mike Gatto, could not be here, but he also wanted to recognize you for the good work you did tonight and for the people of Glendale. So our city clerk will present those to each of you.
Thank you very much, Dan. I think it's rather appropriate that this important topic occurred on this week. A couple of important days, obviously. Today is Denim Day, a day that has been now universally, I think, recognized as a day where we draw attention to violence against those who are abused, who are dragged into the terrible world of trafficking, human trafficking. And tomorrow, of course, is the 99th anniversary of another great tragedy, the Armenian genocide, of which many people who live in Glendale, reside in Glendale, are descendants of the survivors of that tragedy, and those who perished as well, myself included. And it is no secret to those who have studied that history that know that many of the young children who survived that tragedy and were orphaned were dragged into the world of human trafficking as slaves. And also the fact that we're having it in Glendale, a city that had the courage recently to erect a monument just a stone's throw from here, acknowledging the crimes that were committed by the Imperial Japanese forces against the peoples whom they conquered and occupied and abused with the Comfort Women Memorial. We are the first city to do so on the West Coast. So you being here and the important comments that you made brought to mind a quote by one of my favorite Americans, someone who I'm reminded of every April because in the spirit of a little bit of levity in light of the serious topic, it is baseball season after all. And Jackie Robinson, who lived and played ball and made history just next door to us in Pasadena, said, "A life is not important except in the impact that it has on the lives of others." And truly, each of you, through your work, through your words, through your deeds, are making an impact on the lives of so many who are here learning from you and learning how to be a voice and an advocate, but more importantly, for the tens, hundreds, thousands who do not have a voice, who live in the shadows, and who are hoping for that glimmer of light of hope to be able to come out of the shadows and live their lives in dignity. So for that, I thank you. And our State Assembly member thanks you. So to Lesford Duncan, this is a proclamation from the commission, or the committee that has organized this week's events, the Man's Inhumanity to Man, or People's Inhumanity to People, I would rather say, a human trafficking panel discussion. And it reads, in recognition of this powerful discussion, I thank you for your efforts to educate the community and raise awareness on human trafficking. Your dedication to serve as a positive example for the 43rd Assembly District is truly commendable. I wish you continued success and fulfillment, and signed by Assemblymember Gatto. Thank you. Thank you. Also to Anna Cho Fenley, who moderated this so successfully. Anna, thank you. Same message. I'm not going to read each one because it's the same. Delita Miller. Delita. To Anna Cody. And last but not least, to Dr. Stephanie Powell. Thank everyone on the Commission on Status of Women. I noticed a number of other commissioners from various boards and commissions that we have here, Arts and Culture, the library staff, the city staff, our residents, neighbors, council members, and everyone who was able to make this event possible. And I wish you continued success in your work. Thank you.
Well, again, I want to say thank you to all of you for attending and learning the knowledge that these folks shared with us tonight. I give them another round of applause and thank them for coming out. Thank you.
I would like to thank Commission on Status of Women and Teresa Alexandrian for a fantastic job for finding all the right people for tonight's presentation. And on behalf of the Men's Inhumanity to Man's Committee and the Week of Remembrance Committee, I would like to thank you all for coming here. The topic was very dark, heartbreaking, and very hard to think about, but I want you to leave not crestfallen and heartbroken, but empowered to go and do something. Go and save as many lives as you can. With that, I would bid you all farewell and have a good night. Thank you.